The small village of Liang, nestled in the mountains of Anhui province, wasn't known for much. Farmers tended their fields from sunrise to sunset. Children played in dusty courtyards, and life moved at the unhurried pace it had for generations. In this ordinary place lived a most extraordinary boy named Chen Wei. Chen had never seen the brilliant green of the rice paddies surrounding his village or the faces of his loving parents. Blind since birth, his world was shaped by sounds, textures, and the gentle guidance of his family. But what might have been a limitation for some became the foundation of his remarkable gift. The Chen family lived in a modest two-room house at the edge of the village. Chen's father worked long hours in construction in the nearest city, returning home only on weekends. His mother sold vegetables at the local market, while his grandmother, Nai, watched over him during the day. They weren't poor by village standards, but there was never money for extras, especially not for things like music lessons or instruments. It happened on Chen's 8th birthday that his life changed forever. That morning, Nai had taken his hand as they walked through the village. "I have a surprise for you," she whispered, excitement making her voice tremble slightly. Chen felt her weathered hand squeeze his as they turned down an unfamiliar path. They entered the old community center, a building Chen knew only by its echoing hallways and the smell of dust and aging paper. The center had been mostly abandoned after a newer one was built closer to the main village square. Only the occasional government meeting or festival preparation still brought people through its doors. "Wait here," Nai said, her footsteps moving away across what sounded like a large, empty room. Chen stood still, turning his head slightly as he took in the sounds and feel of the space. The air felt cooler here, and his footsteps had echoed when they entered. The room must be big with high ceilings. Then he heard it. A strange, hollow thunk followed by another. Curious, Chen began to walk carefully toward the sound, his hands slightly extended before him. "Careful now," Nai called, hearing his approach. "Come feel what I found for you." His hands touched something large and smooth. Wood, polished but with small cracks and imperfections he could feel beneath his fingertips. It was tall, coming up almost to his chest, and when his exploring fingers found the front, they discovered a row of strange objects. "Keys," Nai explained, guiding his finger to press one down. A clear, perfect note rang out, vibrating through the wood and into Chen's hands. The sound seemed to bloom in the empty room, filling the space with something magical before slowly fading away. Chen gasped, pressing another key, then another, delighted by each unique tone. "It's a piano," Nai said. "The director says it's been sitting here for years. Nobody uses it anymore. When I told him how you love music, he said you could come play it whenever you want." Chen couldn't speak. His fingers moved across the keys, pressing softly, then with more confidence. The random notes didn't make a song, but to Chen they were the most beautiful sounds he'd ever heard. "How did you know?" he finally whispered. Nai laughed softly. "I hear you, little one." Always humming, tapping rhythms on the table, singing along with the radio. Music lives inside you. From that day forward, Chen spent every free moment at the old community center. At first, he simply explored the piano, learning the feel of the keys, understanding how they were arranged, discovering which combinations of notes sounded pleasing together. He had no teacher, no books, no way to learn except through his ears and his instinct. When the radio played at home, Chen would listen intently, then rush to the community center the next day to try recreating what he'd heard. Sometimes other children would come watch the blind boy play, amazed at how his fingers found the right keys without seeing them. "How do you do that?" a boy named Li asked one afternoon. Chen shrugged, his fingers never stopping their dance across the keys. "I just hear it in my head and my fingers find it. It's like the music is already there. I'm just letting it out," Li laughed. "That's weird." But it wasn't weird to Chen. It made perfect sense. The music was inside him, had always been inside him, waiting for a way to escape into the world. His mother worried at first. "You should be studying more," she'd say when he returned home late again. "Music won't put food on the table or help you find a job someday." But Chen's father saw something different. Though he spoke little, one evening he placed a hand on his wife's arm as she prepared to scold their son. "Let him play," he said quietly. "I've heard him. This isn't just a child's game." As months passed, Chen's playing transformed. No longer random notes or simple copies of tunes he'd heard. He began creating his own music. Melodies that spoke of the rushing stream behind their house. Harmonies that captured the sounds of village life. Rhythms that matched the beating of his own heart. Word spread throughout the village. People would sometimes gather outside the community center windows, listening to the blind boy play. They'd never heard anything like it, certainly not in their small village, where the only music came from old radios or traditional songs at festivals. Chen's grandmother brought him recordings when she could, classical pieces by famous composers, folk songs from different regions, even modern pop music from the city. Chen absorbed them all, his mind cataloging styles and techniques that his fingers would later experiment with. On his 10th birthday, the community center director presented him with a key. "This way you can come play even when I'm not here," the man said, pressing the cool metal into Chen's palm. "Just be careful and lock up when you leave." It was the best gift Chen could imagine. Now he could play anytime he wanted, early mornings before school, late evenings after homework, weekends for hours on end. The piano became his window to a world he couldn't see but could feel more deeply than anyone. His teachers at school noticed the change in him too. Chen had always been a quiet student, bright but reluctant to participate. Now he spoke more freely, raised his hand to answer questions, even made jokes with classmates during lunch. Music has awakened something in him, his literature teacher told his mother during a school meeting. He's opening up like a flower turning toward the sun. What no one fully understood was how Chen's blindness actually helped his musical development. Without visual distractions, his ears had become extraordinarily sensitive. He could hear subtle differences in tone that others missed, could memorize complex pieces after hearing them just once or twice. The old piano itself became a character in Chen's story. It wasn't a fine instrument. Some keys stuck occasionally, others had a slightly tinny sound, and the pedals squeaked when pressed. But Chen knew every imperfection, adapted to them, sometimes even incorporated them into his playing. To him, the piano's flaws made it unique, gave it character, like the wrinkles on his grandmother's face that he traced with gentle fingers when she told him stories. In his 11th year, a music teacher named Ms. Zhang came to their school. She had studied at a conservatory in Beijing before returning to her home province to teach children. The first time she heard Chen play, she stood in the doorway of the community center, transfixed. Chen sensed someone was there but continued playing. His current piece of melody he'd composed about the rain. When he finished, he heard soft footsteps approaching. "Who taught you to play like that?" Miss Zhang asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Chen turned toward her voice and smiled shyly. "No one. I just listen and play what I hear in my head." That's extraordinary," she said. "Would you play something else for me?" For the next hour, Ms. Zhang listened as Chen played piece after piece. Some recognizable classics he'd learned from recordings, others his own compositions. When he finally stopped, his fingers tired, she was silent for a long moment. "Chen," she said finally, "you have a rare gift. With proper training, you could become something truly special." Chen's heart leaped at her words, but reality quickly dampened his excitement. "My family can't afford lessons," he said simply. No self-pity in his voice, just stating a fact. Ms. Zhang touched his shoulder gently. "Let me worry about that. For now, I'll come here twice a week after school. No charge. Some talents are too precious to waste." And so began Chen's first formal music education. Ms. Zhang was a strict teacher, correcting his hand position, teaching him proper techniques he'd never known existed. Sometimes Chen felt frustrated, having to unlearn habits he'd developed on his own, but Ms. Zhang's belief in him never wavered. "You have something most trained musicians spend their lives trying to find," she told him one day when he'd mastered a particularly difficult passage. "You have heart. Everything else, technique, theory, these things can be taught. But the soul in your music, that comes from within you." As word of Chen's talent spread beyond the village, people sometimes traveled just to hear him play. A reporter from a regional newspaper came once, writing a small article about the blind boy pianist that caught the attention of music lovers in neighboring towns. Chen remained largely unaware of his growing fame. He played because he had to, because the music inside him demanded release, because sitting at those keys felt more natural than anything else in his world of darkness. What Chen didn't know was that his life was about to change forever. In the provincial capital, preparations were underway for a charity concert featuring the world-renowned Maestro Hiroshi Yamamoto. And Ms. Zhang had already begun making plans that would bring Chen's private gift into the public eye in ways he could never have imagined. The news about Maestro Hiroshi Yamamoto's visits spread through the province like wildfire. The famous pianist and conductor rarely performed in smaller cities, let alone remote areas like theirs. His charity concert, raising funds for music education in rural schools, had sold out within hours of being announced. Ms. Zhang couldn't stop talking about it during Chen's lessons. "He's not just any musician," she explained, her voice quickening with excitement. "Maestro Yamamoto has performed with the greatest orchestras in the world. He's judged international competitions. His recordings have won every major award." Chen nodded politely as he continued practicing the Bach piece Ms. Zhang had assigned. He enjoyed hearing about famous musicians, but they existed in a world so far removed from his own that they might as well have been characters in the stories his grandmother told him at bedtime. "And," Ms. Zhang continued, pausing dramatically, "he's giving a workshop the day before the concert. For local music students." Chen's fingers stilled on the keys. "A workshop?" "Yes. He'll listen to a few selected students play and offer guidance." "I've already submitted your name." Chen's heart began to race. "But I'm not. I've never even had real lessons until you started teaching me. I can't play for someone like him." Ms. Zhang placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Chen, you have more natural talent than most students who've had lessons their entire lives. Trust me on this." That night Chen couldn't sleep. He lay in bed imagining himself playing for the great maestro. What if he made mistakes? What if his playing wasn't good enough? What if the maestro laughed at this blind village boy who thought he could play piano? The next morning at breakfast, Chen's mother noticed his unusual silence. "What's troubling you?" she asked, placing a bowl of rice porridge in front of him. Chen explained about the workshop, his voice growing quieter with each word. When he finished, there was a moment of silence. Then he heard his father's chair scrape back. "I need to leave for work now," his father said, his deep voice filling the small room. Chen heard him walk around the table, felt his father's rough hand rest briefly on his head. "But know this, son. People like us don't often get chances like this. When they come, we must be brave enough to take them." With that simple statement, his father left for his long journey back to the city construction site where he worked. But his words stayed with Chen, giving him a courage he hadn't felt before. For the next 2 weeks, Chen practiced harder than ever. He woke before dawn to visit the community center piano, returned there during his lunch break, and stayed until the center director gently reminded him it was time to lock up at night. His fingers developed calluses, and sometimes his wrists ached from the hours of playing. But he didn't care. Ms. Zhang adjusted his lessons, focusing on 3 pieces they agreed would showcase his abilities: a Bach prelude that demonstrated his technical skill, a Chopin nocturne that highlighted his emotional sensitivity, and one of his own compositions that revealed his unique creative voice. "Remember," Ms. Zhang instructed during their final lesson before the workshop, "technique matters, but what will truly set you apart is how you make people feel. When you play your own music, Chen, you speak directly to people's hearts." The day of the workshop arrived, with a light spring rain that created a gentle patter on the roof of the community center where Chen waited with 11 other students from around the province. Ms. Zhang had arranged for him to be excused from school and had accompanied him on the bus ride to the provincial capital, where the workshop was being held. Chen sat quietly, his hands folded in his lap, listening to the nervous chatter of the other students around him. Most of them seemed to know each other from previous competitions or master classes. They discussed their chosen pieces, their years of training, the famous teachers some had studied with. "I've been playing since I was 4, a girl near Chen boasted. "My mother took me to Shanghai for lessons every month until my teacher moved here to open her own studio. My parents bought me a brand new Yamaha Grand last year," a boy responded. "My teacher says the quality of your instrument affects the quality of your playing." Chen touched the worn fabric of his pants, suddenly conscious of his simple clothes and village haircut. These students came from wealthy families, had advantages he couldn't imagine. What was he doing here among them? A hush fell over the room as the door opened and several people entered. Chen couldn't see them, of course, but he could hear the distinctive footsteps. 3 people, one with a slight limp. "Good morning, young musicians," a man's voice said, his Chinese perfect but spoken with a distinct Japanese accent. "I am Hiroshi Yamamoto. Thank you for sharing your Saturday with me." The voice was kind but carried a natural authority that commanded attention. Chen felt the atmosphere in the room change immediately as everyone sat up straighter. "We will proceed in the order listed in your program," Maestro Yamamoto continued. "Each student will play their prepared piece, after which I will offer some brief comments. Please remember that my goal is to help you grow as musicians, so I will be honest in my feedback." One by one, the students performed. Chen listened intently to each performance, admiring their skill while also noting that many played with technical precision but little emotion. After each student finished, the maestro would offer specific observations, praising their strengths and gently pointing out areas for improvement. As the morning progressed, Chen's anxiety grew. He was scheduled to perform last, a position Miss Jiang had specifically requested, though she hadn't explained why. Finally, after nearly 3 hours, Chen heard his name called. "Chen Wei," the workshop coordinator announced, performing Bach's Prelude in C major, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, and an original composition titled Village Dawn. Ms. Jiang squeezed his hand and whispered, "Remember what we practiced. Just play the way you do when it's just you and the piano." Chen stood, unfolding his white cane. There was a murmur in the room. Apparently some of the students and observers hadn't realized he was blind. He felt Ms. Jiang's guiding hand on his elbow, leading him to the piano at the front of the room. As he settled onto the bench, adjusting its height and position, he heard someone whisper, "He's blind? How can he possibly play?" Then came Maestro Yamamoto's voice, closer now. "Young man, I understand you've prepared 3 pieces. That's quite ambitious." "Yes, sir," Chen replied, his voice barely audible. "Perhaps we should start with just one," the maestro suggested kindly. "The Bach, I think. Just play it for fun, no pressure. We've all had a long morning." Chen nodded, positioning his fingers over the keys. He could sense the lowered expectations in the room. The blind boy from the countryside was a curiosity, not a serious musician. Even the great maestro was being kind, asking him to play just for fun. Taking a deep breath, Chen began the Bach Prelude. The familiar notes flowed from his fingers, the simple yet profound progression of chords filling the room. He played with the precision Miss Jiang had drilled into him, but also with the natural feeling that had always guided his music. When he finished, there was a moment of silence, then polite applause. He could hear people shifting in their seats, probably ready for the workshop to end. "The Chopin next, please," Maestro Yamamoto said, his tone unchanged. Surprised at being asked to continue, Chen moved directly into the Nocturne. This piece was different, romantic, emotional, requiring not just technical skill but interpretive sensitivity. As he played, Chen forgot his nervousness, forgot the audience, forgot everything except the music itself. His fingers drew out the haunting melody, building the emotional arc of the piece with an instinctive understanding that belied his young age and limited training. The final notes of the Chopin faded, and this time the silence that followed felt different, charged somehow. The applause when it came was stronger. "And now your composition, please," the maestro said, his voice betraying no emotion. Chen took another deep breath. This was the piece that mattered most to him, his own creation, music that had come from within him. Village Dawn was inspired by the sounds he woke to each morning: roosters crowing in the distance, the soft footsteps of farmers heading to their fields, his mother humming as she prepared breakfast, the gradual awakening of the world around him. His fingers began to move across the keys, bringing these sounds to life through his music. The piece started simply, then grew more complex as more elements of the village morning joined in. Chen played with complete abandon now, all his fear gone, sharing through music the beauty of the world as he experienced it. When the final note faded away, Chen sat motionless, his hands resting lightly on the keys. The silence in the room was absolute. Had he played poorly? Had everyone left? Why was there no response? Then he heard it, a single person beginning to clap, then another joining in, and suddenly the room erupted in applause. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" and others joined in. Chen sat in confusion, overwhelmed by the response. As the applause finally died down, he heard footsteps approaching the piano. Someone sat down on the bench beside him. "Young man," Maestro Yamamoto said quietly, "how long have you been playing the piano?" "About 3 years, sir," Chen replied. "But I've only had proper lessons with Ms. Jiang for the past 6 months." There was a sharp intake of breath from the maestro. And the piece you just played, The Village Dawn, you composed this yourself? Yes, sir. A hand rested gently on Chen's shoulder. In my 40 years as a musician, I have encountered perhaps 3 or 4 true prodigies. I believe you may be one of them. Chen's heart seemed to stop. But I'm just a village boy. I don't even have a piano at home. I practice on an old one at our community center. Music does not care about such things, the maestro said, his voice warm. True talent can emerge anywhere, even in the most unlikely places. What matters is what happens next. What do you mean, sir? Maestro Yamamoto stood up. I mean, Chen Wei, that this workshop was just the beginning. If you are willing and if your family agrees, I believe we have much more work to do together. As Chen was led back to his seat by Ms. Zhang, he could hear people buzzing with excitement around him. His teacher was crying, he realized as she squeezed his hand. I told you, she whispered. I told you that you were special. But Chen barely heard her. His mind was spinning with the maestro's words. This was just the beginning? What did that mean for a blind boy from a small village with nothing but an old piano and a love for music? Whatever it meant, he knew with absolute certainty that his life had just changed forever. The bus ride back to the village seemed to take forever. Chen sat beside Ms. Zhang, his mind replaying every moment of the workshop. The maestro's words echoed in his thoughts. True talent can emerge anywhere, even in the most unlikely places. What matters is what happens next. What did he mean? Chen finally asked, breaking the long silence. About having more work to do together? Ms. Zhang squeezed his hand. Maestro Yamamoto wants to help you, Chen. He believes in your talent just as I do. But how? He lives in Japan most of the year. He travels all over the world for concerts. Let's not worry about the details now, Ms. Zhang said. First, we need to talk with your parents. Chen nodded, but his stomach tightened with worry. His family struggled to make ends meet. His father worked so hard already, spending weeks away from home at the construction site. How could they possibly afford whatever opportunity the maestro might offer? When they arrived back at the village, the sun was already setting. Ms. Zhang walked Chen all the way to his house, something she had never done before. He could tell from her quick, energetic steps that she was excited, perhaps even nervous. His mother opened the door before they even knocked. How did it go? She asked, her voice anxious. Word had already spread through the village about Chen's performance at the workshop, carried by a cousin of one of the other students who had been there. Your son was magnificent, Ms. Zhang said. Is your husband home? We need to discuss something important. To Chen's surprise, his father was home, even though it was still the middle of his work week. I took time off, he explained simply when Chen expressed his surprise. This seemed more important. They gathered around the small kitchen table. Chen's grandmother brought tea while his mother prepared snacks for their guest. Chen sat quietly, listening to Ms. Zhang explain everything that had happened at the workshop, describing the maestro's reaction and his interest in Chen's future. He wants to offer Chen a special opportunity, Ms. Zhang finally said, her voice solemn. Maestro Yamamoto has arranged for Chen to audition at the Shanghai Conservatory of Music next month. A sharp intake of breath came from Chen's mother. Shanghai? But that's hundreds of kilometers away. The most prestigious music school in China, Ms. Zhang continued. They have a program for exceptional young talents. Full scholarship, including boarding. Chen would receive the finest musical education available in the country. Silence fell over the room. Chen could feel the weight of this moment, the enormity of what was being offered, a chance most village children couldn't even dream of. And if he is accepted, his father asked, his voice carefully neutral. He would live at the conservatory during the school year. Come home for holidays and summer break, Ms. Zhang explained. It would be a big change, yes, but think of what it could mean for his future. He's just a boy, his mother said softly, only 12 years old. And his condition. The conservatory has worked with visually impaired students before, Ms. Zhang said gently. Not many, but enough that they have experience. And Maestro Yamamoto has promised to take a personal interest in Chen's development. Chen's father cleared his throat. May we have some time to discuss this as a family? Of course, Ms. Zhang stood up. The audition is in 4 weeks. You don't need to decide tonight, but... She paused. I hope you'll consider it. Opportunities like this come once in a lifetime. After she left, the family sat in silence for a long moment. Then Chen's grandmother spoke up, her voice cracking with age but firm with conviction. In my 80 years, I've learned one thing for certain. Life offers few gifts. When one appears, you must be brave enough to accept it. But Shanghai is so far, his mother said. He's never been away from home.
How will he manage?
I can do it, Chen said suddenly, surprising himself with his certainty. I want to try. His father's hand came to rest on his shoulder. It won't be easy, son. I know, Chen replied. But the piano, the music, it's the one thing I've found that makes me feel like my blindness doesn't matter. When I play, I can see things in my own way. Another silence followed, this one different. Chen could sense his parents exchanging looks, having one of those wordless conversations parents sometimes have. Finally, his father spoke. Then we will find a way to make this happen. The next 4 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Chen practiced more intensely than ever before, working on the pieces Ms. Zhang selected for his audition. Word spread through the village about Chen's opportunity, and neighbors stopped by to offer encouragement and small gifts to help with his journey. The local tailor, whose son Chen had befriended at school, made him a new shirt and pants for the audition. The elderly man who ran the village store contributed toward his bus ticket to Shanghai. Even the community center director polished the old piano keys with special wax he ordered from the city, wanting Chen to practice on the best instrument possible. The whole village is behind you, his grandmother told him one evening as they sat on the steps outside their home. You carry all our hopes with you. Chen felt the weight of those expectations, but also the strength they gave him. He was no longer just playing for himself. He was playing for everyone who had believed in him. The night before his departure for Shanghai, Chen couldn't sleep. He slipped out of bed and made his way through the familiar rooms of his home, trailing his fingers along the walls, memorizing every crack and corner. What if the conservatory didn't accept him? Or worse, what if they did and he had to leave this place that had shaped his entire life? His wandering led him to the kitchen, where he was surprised to find his father sitting alone. Can't sleep either, his father asked. Chen shook his head and sat across from him. I was thinking about my father, your grandfather, his father said after a moment. He wanted to be a teacher, did you know that? He read every book he could find, taught himself so much, but there was no money for school beyond the basic education in those days. So he worked the fields instead, just like his father before him. Chen listened, surprised. His father rarely spoke about the past. The night before I left for my first construction job in the city, he told me something I've never forgotten. He said, each generation should climb higher than the last. That's how we measure our success as parents. His father's voice grew thick with emotion. Tomorrow you climb higher than I ever could, son. Higher than any of us thought possible. Chen felt tears well up in his eyes. I'm scared, he admitted. His father reached across the table and took his hand. That's how you know it matters. The next morning, the entire family traveled with Chen to Shanghai. The city overwhelmed his senses. So many sounds, smells, and the press of countless people moving in all directions. Chen held tightly to his mother's arm as they navigated the crowded streets. The Shanghai Conservatory of Music was like nothing Chen had ever experienced. Even from outside, he could hear music flowing from the building. Pianos, violins, cellos, and instruments he couldn't even identify, all being practiced simultaneously in different rooms. Ms. Zhang met them at the entrance, having arrived the previous day to make arrangements. Maestro Yamamoto is already here, she told them excitedly. He came specially to observe your audition. Chen's heart raced. The famous pianist had interrupted his international tour schedule just for him. The pressure felt overwhelming suddenly. As they were led through the hallways to the audition room, Chen heard whispers following them. That's him, someone said. The blind boy the maestro discovered. The audition room fell silent when they entered. Chen could sense a large space with high ceilings, from the way sounds echoed. Ms. Zhang led him to the piano, a magnificent grand that produced the richest sound Chen had ever heard when he tentatively touched a key. The audition committee consists of 5 faculty members, Ms. Zhang whispered to him, and Maestro Yamamoto is sitting in the back of the room. Chen Wei, a woman's voice called from somewhere in front of him. We understand you will play 3 pieces for us today. Yes, ma'am, Chen replied, his voice steadier than he felt. Bach's Italian Concerto First Movement, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, and my own composition, Village Dawn. Very well. When you're ready. Chen took a deep breath, thinking of his village, his family, the old piano in the community center. Then he began to play. The Bach flowed from his fingers with precision and clarity. Chen had always loved the mathematical perfection of Bach, the way the notes intertwined in complex patterns that somehow created perfect harmony. As he played, his nervousness faded, replaced by the familiar joy of making music. He moved directly into the Chopin, allowing the romantic, emotional quality of the piece to contrast with the structured Bach. This was music that spoke of feelings too deep for words: longing, hope, quiet joy tinged with melancholy. Chen poured his own emotions into every note. When he finished the Chopin, there was a murmur from the committee, quickly silenced. Chen paused, gathering himself for his final piece. "Before I play my composition," he said, surprising himself with his courage to speak, "I want to explain that it's about my home, the village where I grew up, the sounds I know best, the place and people who made me who I am." And then he played Village Dawn, the piece he had composed from his heart. As his fingers moved across the keys, Chen was transported home. He could hear the roosters crowing, feel the morning mist, smell his mother's cooking, sense the village coming to life around him. He played with everything he had, knowing that whatever happened next, this moment was real and true. When the final notes faded away, there was complete silence in the room. Chen sat motionless at the piano, waiting. Then from the back of the room, a single person began to applaud. Others quickly joined in, until the sound filled the space completely. "Thank you, Chen Wei," the woman from the committee said when the applause finally died down. Her voice sounded different now, warmer, touched with emotion. "We would like to speak with your parents. Please wait outside." Ms. Zhang led Chen from the room. In the hallway, his parents and grandmother waited anxiously. "How did it go?" his mother asked, pulling him into a hug. "I don't know," Chen replied honestly. "I played my best. That's all I could do." They waited together, the minutes stretching endlessly. Finally, the door opened and the committee members emerged. "Mr. and Mrs. Wei," one of them said, "we would like to speak with you about your son's future at the Shanghai Conservatory of Music." As his parents were led away, Chen felt Maestro Yamamoto's hand on his shoulder. "Whatever happens next," the maestro said quietly, "remember this day. Remember how it feels to share your gift with the world. That feeling will sustain you through the hard work ahead." Chen nodded, understanding for the first time that this was just the beginning of his journey. The real performance, the one that would define his life, was still to come. The hallway outside the audition room felt endless to Chen as he waited with Ms. Zhang and his grandmother. He could hear muffled voices from behind the closed door where his parents were meeting with the conservatory committee. What were they discussing? Would he be accepted? And if he was, what would that mean for his family? "Your playing was beautiful," his grandmother whispered, her weathered hand finding his. "Whatever happens, remember that." Chen nodded, his throat too tight to speak. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind, from playing for Maestro Yamamoto at the workshop to this moment, standing in the hallowed halls of the Shanghai Conservatory. It seemed impossible that so much could change so quickly. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, the door opened. Chen turned toward the sound, trying to read the atmosphere, to understand what had been decided before anyone spoke. "Chen," his father's voice came, steady but with an undercurrent of something Chen had never heard before. Was it pride, emotion? "The committee has made their decision." Chen felt Ms. Zhang's hand tighten on his shoulder. "They have offered you a full scholarship," his father continued. "Not just for the junior program. They want to create a special track for you. Private lessons with their top professors. A dormitory room. Even funds for us to visit during holidays." Chen stood frozen, unable to process what he was hearing. A full scholarship? A special track created just for him? Is it what you want, Chen?" his mother asked, her voice wavering slightly. "To stay here in Shanghai? To study music seriously? Was it what he wanted?" Chen had never allowed himself to dream so big. Playing the old piano at the community center had been joy enough. But now faced with this opportunity, "Yes," he said, the word coming out barely above a whisper. Then more firmly, "Yes, it's what I want more than anything." He heard his mother's soft intake of breath, felt her arms wrap around him in a tight embrace. "Then it's what we want for you too," she whispered against his hair. The next few days passed in a blur of preparations. There were forms to complete, Arrangements to make, a dormitory room to set up. The conservatory assigned a student guide named Liang to help Chen learn to navigate the sprawling campus. "I'll be right across the hall," Liang explained as he showed Chen around the dormitory. "I'm a third-year violin student, but I'll be your official buddy for the first semester. That means I'll help you find your way to classes, the dining hall, practice rooms, anywhere you need to go." "Is it normal for students to help like this?" Chen asked, feeling both grateful and embarrassed at requiring special assistance. "Actually, yes," Liang replied, his voice friendly and matter-of-fact. "The conservatory has a strong mentorship program. Everyone gets a buddy. Yours just happens to have the additional job of being your eyes until you learn the layout." That simple statement, practical without pity, made Chen feel instantly more at ease. Perhaps he wouldn't be seen as just the blind student here after all. The hardest moment came when it was time for his family to return to the village. They had stayed in Shanghai for 3 days, helping Chen settle in, meeting his teachers, and touring the facilities. But now they needed to return home, his father to his construction job, his mother to her market stall, his grandmother to the house that would now feel emptier without Chen. "We're so proud of you," his father said, his usual stoicism cracking as he hugged Chen goodbye. "Work hard. Show them what our family is made of." His mother couldn't speak through her tears, just held him tightly as if memorizing the feel of him in her arms. His grandmother was the last to say goodbye, pressing something small and hard into his palm. "What is this?" Chen asked, running his fingers over the object. "A pebble from the stream behind our house," she explained. "I've carried it in my pocket every day since you were born. Now it's yours, a piece of home to keep with you always." Chen closed his fingers around the small stone, feeling its smooth surface worn by years of water and his grandmother's touch. He slipped it into his pocket, knowing he would carry it with him everywhere. That night, alone in his dormitory room for the first time, Chen felt the weight of his decision. The sounds were all wrong. No roosters, no familiar creaks of his home's wooden floors, no soft breathing of his family sleeping nearby. Instead, there were distant pianos and violins, the hum of the city beyond the windows, the occasional footsteps in the hallway outside his door. He took out his grandmother's pebble, running his fingers over its smooth surface, and allowed himself one moment of doubt. Had he made the right choice? Could a village boy really belong in this world of refined music and sophisticated people? A knock at his door interrupted these thoughts. "Chen, it's Liang. Just checking if you need anything before lights out." Chen tucked the pebble back into his pocket. "I'm fine, thank you," he called, making his decision. No more doubts. He was here to work, to learn, to grow. He would make his family and himself proud. The first weeks at the conservatory were challenging beyond anything Chen had imagined. His days began early with theory classes, where he learned to read music in Braille, a complex system of dots that represented notes, timing, and expression. The Braille music teacher, Professor Wang, was strict but patient. "Music notation is a language," she explained. "Just as you learned to speak before you could read, you've learned to play by ear before learning to read music. Now we're connecting those skills." Afternoons were filled with piano lessons and practice sessions. Chen quickly discovered that playing by ear, which had served him so well in the village, was just the beginning of what he needed to know. His primary piano professor, Dr. Liu, pushed him to develop proper technique, to understand the structure behind the music, to interpret pieces as the composers intended rather than just by instinct. "Your natural talent is remarkable," Dr. Liu told him after a particularly frustrating lesson, where Chen had struggled with a difficult passage. "But talent alone is not enough. Great musicians combine their natural gifts with discipline and knowledge." Some nights, exhausted from hours of practice and study, Chen would sit on his bed holding his grandmother's pebble, fighting homesickness and doubt. During these moments, he would remind himself of Maestro Yamamoto's words. True talent can emerge anywhere, even in the most unlikely places. What matters is what happens next. This was his what happens next. It wasn't easy, but nothing truly valuable ever was. Slowly, Chen began to find his rhythm at the conservatory. He made friends among the other students, not just Liang, but others who shared his passion for music. There was Min, a flute player whose laugh bubbled like the highest notes of her instrument. Tao, a serious cello student who spoke little but played with soul-stirring depth. And Ying, a piano student 1 year ahead of Chen, who became both his fiercest competitor and closest ally. "Your playing has something the rest of us have to work for," Ying told him one day after hearing Chen practice. "You play from somewhere deep inside. Like you're not just making music, you're speaking through it." "But I still make so many technical mistakes," Chen admitted. "Technique can be taught," Ying said, unconsciously echoing Ms. Zhang's words from months before. "Soul cannot." 3 months into his time at the conservatory, Chen received news that Maestro Yamamoto would be returning to Shanghai. The maestro had been following Chen's progress through reports from his teachers and wanted to hear him play again. "This is a great honor," Dr. Liu told Chen. "The maestro rarely takes such interest in a student. You must prepare something special to show him how you've grown." Chen thought carefully about what to play. He wanted to demonstrate his improved technique, yes, but also to share how his understanding of music had deepened. After much consideration, he chose Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, a piece that required both technical skill and emotional depth. For 2 weeks, Chen practiced the sonata every free moment he had. He worked with Dr. Liu on the technically challenging third movement, focusing on speed and precision. With Professor Wang, he explored the history of the piece, learning about Beethoven's life and the emotions that might have inspired such haunting music. But most importantly, Chen found his own connection to the music. In the first movement's gentle, rippling notes, he heard the night sounds of his village, the soft wind in the trees, the distant murmur of the stream, the peaceful breathing of his family asleep around him. In the stormy final movement, he found the courage that had brought him to Shanghai, the determination to create a new path for himself. The day of Maestro Yamamoto's visit arrived with a flutter of excitement throughout the conservatory. Students whispered in hallways, teachers dressed more formally, and there was an atmosphere of anticipation that even Chen could sense. Chen's performance was scheduled for the afternoon in the small recital hall. As he waited backstage, he could hear the murmur of voices as people filed in, not just Maestro Yamamoto and his teachers, but other students and faculty who had heard about the blind boy pianist who had so impressed the famous maestro. "Nervous?" Liang asked, waiting with him. "Yes," Chen admitted, "but a good kind of nervous. Like my body knows something important is about to happen." When it was time, Liang led Chen to the piano. The room fell silent as Chen took his seat, adjusting the bench, taking a moment to center himself. He reached into his pocket, touching his grandmother's pebble briefly for luck, then placed his hands on the keys. He began to play, and from the first notes, something magical happened. The months of training, the homesickness, the doubts and triumphs, all of it flowed through his fingers into the music. Chen played the Moonlight Sonata as if he had written it himself, as if the notes were not on a page but in his heart. When he finished the powerful final chords, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the room erupted in applause. Chen sat still at the piano, his heart pounding until he felt a hand on his shoulder. "Chen Wei." Maestro Yamamoto's voice was thick with emotion. "When I first heard you play, I knew you had a gift. Today I heard not just gift but growth, not just talent but dedication. You have begun to transform from a talented child into an artist." Chen bowed his head, overwhelmed by the praise. "But this is still just the beginning," the maestro continued. "In 6 months, the conservatory will hold its winter showcase. The finest students will perform. I have arranged for special guests to attend. Music critics, recording industry representatives, concert promoters." He paused. "And your family?" "All expenses paid." Chen's head shot up. "My family? They'll come here?" "Yes, I want them to see what their brave decision has made possible. And I want the world to hear you play." The maestro squeezed Chen's shoulder gently. 6 months to prepare. Show us all how brightly your light can shine." As Chen was led from the stage, his mind was already racing with possibilities. 6 months to prepare the most important performance of his young life. 6 months to prove that a blind boy from a small village deserved his place among the musical elite. 6 months to make his family proud. 6 months seemed like an eternity when Maestro Yamamoto first mentioned the winter showcase. But as Chen threw himself into preparation, the days began to blur together, passing with alarming speed. Before he knew it, autumn had faded into winter and the showcase was just weeks away. "You need to select your program," Dr. Liu reminded him during their lesson. "Something that tells your story, that reveals who you are as an artist." Chen considered this carefully. The showcase was his opportunity to demonstrate how far he had come, but also to honor the journey that had brought him here. After much thought, he decided on 3 pieces: Bach's Italian Concerto to display his technical growth, Debussy's Clair de Lune to showcase his interpretive sensitivity, and a new composition of his own titled From Village to City. This final piece became his obsession in the weeks leading up to the showcase. In it, Chen wanted to capture his entire journey, from the simple melodies of village life to the complex harmonies of the conservatory, from the boy who played an old piano just for fun to the serious student of music he had become. "It's ambitious," Dr. Liu commented after hearing an early draft. "Perhaps too ambitious for the time we have." But Chen was determined. He worked on the composition every night after finishing his regular practice, sometimes staying up until his fingers were too tired to continue. Liang would often find him asleep at his desk, Braille music notation papers scattered around him. "You're going to exhaust yourself before the showcase even arrives," Liang warned, bringing Chen a cup of tea one evening. "Even great artists need rest," Chen smiled tiredly. "Just a little longer. I'm close to figuring out the transition between the second and third movements." As the date of the showcase approached, news arrived that filled Chen with both excitement and nervousness. His family had confirmed they would attend. The conservatory had arranged for their travel and accommodation, just as Maestro Yamamoto had promised. "They'll arrive the day before the showcase," Professor Wang told him. "You'll have time to show them around the conservatory before your performance." The thought of reuniting with his family after 6 months apart gave Chen renewed energy. He wanted them to be proud, to see that their sacrifice, letting him leave home, supporting his dream, had been worthwhile. 2 weeks before the showcase, disaster struck. Chen woke up with a painful swelling in his right wrist. Years of playing without proper technique in the village, combined with his intense practice schedule at the conservatory, had led to tendinitis. "You must rest it completely," the conservatory doctor insisted after examining him. "No piano for at least a week. Then we'll reassess." Chen was devastated. "But the showcase will not happen at all if you cause permanent damage," Dr. Liu interrupted firmly. "We'll modify your practice schedule when you resume. Quality over quantity, Chen." For the first time since arriving at the conservatory, Chen felt truly helpless. He attended his theory classes and listened to recordings, but the inability to practice left him restless and worried. What if he couldn't perform at the showcase? What if his family traveled all this way only to find he had failed? During this difficult time, his friends rallied around him. Ying brought recordings of great pianists for them to analyze together. Tao invited Chen to attend his cello practices, teaching him about how string instruments approach the same pieces Chen played on piano. Min read him stories when he couldn't sleep, distracting him from his worries. "Your hands may be resting," she told him, "but your musician's mind can still grow." A week passed, and the doctor approved light practice, just 30 minutes a day to start, gradually increasing if there was no pain. Chen had to be strategic, focusing on the most crucial sections of each piece, trusting that his previous work would sustain the rest. 3 days before the showcase, Maestro Yamamoto arrived at the conservatory. He requested a private session with Chen to assess his readiness. "I hear you've had some difficulties," the maestro said as Chen played through portions of his program. "Yes, sir," Chen admitted. "My wrist. I haven't been able to practice as much as I planned. And yet your playing has more depth than when I last heard you," Maestro Yamamoto observed. "Sometimes limitations become our greatest teachers. When we cannot rely on endless repetition, we must think more deeply about the music." The maestro worked with Chen for 2 hours, offering suggestions to minimize strain on his wrist, helping him find places where he could conserve energy without sacrificing expression. "Remember," the maestro said as their session concluded, "technical perfection is not the goal. Connection is. Connect with the music. Connect with your audience. The notes are just the beginning." The day before the showcase, Chen stood nervously at the conservatory entrance, waiting for his family to arrive. It had been half a year since he'd said goodbye to them, the longest they had ever been apart. What changes would he sense in them? What changes would they hear in his playing? "Chen!" His mother's voice cut through the crowd, and moments later he was enveloped in her embrace. her familiar scent of jasmine and home cooking washing over him. His father's strong hand clasped his shoulder, and his grandmother's papery fingers touched his cheek. "You've grown taller," his grandmother said, wonder in her voice. "And you look different, more confident," Chen smiled, feeling tears prick at his eyes. "I've missed you all so much." "Show us this place that has stolen you from us," his father said. But Chen could hear the pride beneath the gruff words. Chen gave them a tour of the conservatory, introducing them to his friends and teachers, showing them the practice rooms and performance spaces. He saved his dormitory room for last, wanting them to see the small space he had made his own. "You've put up curtains," his mother noted, touching the fabric Chen had hung beside his window. "Liang helped me choose them," Chen explained. "He said they're blue like the stream behind our house." "And what's this?" his father asked, picking something up from Chen's desk. "A model of a grand piano," Chen said. "Tao made it for me so I could understand the inner workings, how the hammers strike the strings, how the pedals function." "You have good friends here," his father observed. "Yes," Chen agreed. "Different from village friends, but good." That evening, they ate dinner together in the conservatory dining hall. Chen's friends joined them, sharing stories of his progress, the funny moments from their first weeks together, the small triumphs they had celebrated along the way. "He works harder than anyone," Ying told Chen's parents. "Sometimes we have to remind him there's more to life than piano." "That sounds like our Chen," his grandmother said with a knowing smile. "Once he sets his mind to something, nothing can stop him." Later, alone with his family in his room, Chen finally asked the question that had been on his mind. Is the village? Is everything okay without me there?" His mother squeezed his hand. "We miss you every day, but knowing you're here doing what you love, what you were meant to do, it fills us with joy." "The whole village asks about you," his father added. "The community center director keeps your piano polished, says it's waiting for your return during summer break." Chen nodded, relieved. Some part of him had worried that in choosing this path, he had somehow betrayed his roots. Instead, he found that his village remained proud of him, remained home even as he built a new life in Shanghai. The morning of the showcase dawned clear and cold. Chen woke early, his mind already running through his program. His wrist felt better, not perfect but manageable. He would need to be careful, to play smartly rather than just with power. The showcase was scheduled for the afternoon in the conservatory's grand concert hall. As the hours ticked by, Chen went through his preparation routine. Gentle stretches for his hands and wrists. Mental practice of each piece. Quiet meditation to calm his nerves. An hour before the performance, Liang came to escort him to the preparation room backstage. "The hall is nearly full," Liang reported, "not just students and faculty. There are music critics from all the major newspapers, representatives from recording companies, even the director of the National Symphony." Chen swallowed hard. "And my family?" "Front row center," Liang assured him. "Your grandmother is telling everyone who will listen that you've been playing since you were 8 on an old community center piano." That made Chen smile. Some things never changed. Backstage, Chen could hear the murmur of the audience, the occasional cough or rustle of programs. Other students were performing first, a violinist, a cellist, a flutist. Each performance was met with generous applause. Then it was Chen's turn. As Liang led him to the piano, Chen felt a moment of pure terror. What if his wrist failed him? What if his new composition wasn't good enough? What if he disappointed everyone who had believed in him? But as his fingers touched the keys, a strange calm settled over him. This was why he was here, not for approval or acclaim, but for this moment of connection between himself and the music, between the music and the audience. He began with Bach, the complex, intricate patterns flowing from his fingers with precision and clarity. He could feel the audience's attention, their appreciation for the technical mastery he had developed over the past 6 months. Next came Debussy's Clair de Lune, the impressionistic piece that painted moonlight on water through sound. Chen played it with delicate expression, each note placed perfectly to create the dreamlike atmosphere the composer had intended. Finally, it was time for his own composition. From Village to City began with simple, folk-like melodies that evoked his childhood home. Gradually, the piece evolved, incorporating more complex harmonies and rhythms as it portrayed his journey to the conservatory. The final movement represented his current life, still rooted in his origins but branching out in new directions, growing toward the light of his future. As the final notes faded away, there was a moment of profound silence. Then the applause began, tentative at first, then building to a thunderous ovation. Chen stood, bowing toward the sound, his heart pounding with emotion. Later, he would learn that Maestro Yamamoto had been the first to rise to his feet, leading the standing ovation that followed. He would hear about the tears on his mother's face, the rare look of open emotion on his father's, the proud smile of his grandmother as she accepted congratulations from strangers around her. He would receive offers from recording companies, invitations to perform with professional orchestras, scholarship opportunities for further study abroad. His journey was just beginning, with paths opening before him that he had never imagined possible. But in that moment, as he stood on stage with the applause washing over him, what mattered most was that he had connected with the music, with the audience, with his past and his future. The blind boy from a small village had found his voice, and the world was listening. Later that night, as his family prepared to return to their hotel, his grandmother pressed something into his hand. "Another pebble?" Chen asked, feeling its smooth surface. "No," she replied, her voice gentle. "The same one. You don't need to carry it anymore. You found your way." Chen closed his fingers around the small stone, then slipped it into his pocket anyway. "I'll always carry it," he said. "To remember where I come from. To remember that even the greatest journeys begin with a single step from home." His grandmother hugged him tightly. "You make us proud, Chen Wei. Not because you played for important people today, not because you might become famous someday, but because you had the courage to follow your heart, even when the path was difficult." As Chen listened to his family's footsteps fade down the hallway, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced since leaving the village. The path ahead would still hold challenges, but he no longer questioned whether he belonged on it. The blind boy who had once been told to play just for fun had found his purpose, his voice, his place in the world. And in doing so, he had learned the most important lesson of all, that music wasn't just something he did. It was who he was, a bridge connecting the village boy he had been to the artist he was.